"That ring doesn't belong to you," she said, her voice steady but shaking inside. The room froze. The billionaire turned, confused. Guests stared. "It belonged to my great-grandmother. She was a slave in your family's house, and you're displaying her stolen ring like it's your legacy?" A gasp echoed. Someone whispered, "Is she serious?" But Amara didn't flinch. This wasn't a confrontation. It was a reckoning. When she told the billionaire who truly owned the ring, what he did next left everyone speechless. Welcome, story lovers. From where are you watching? Hit the like button and drop your city name in the comments so we can see how far our story travels. There was a stillness to the town of Charleston that felt almost sacred. Cobblestone streets shimmered under the low golden sun, and centuries-old oaks stretched across wide boulevards like they were guarding secrets too heavy to be forgotten. This was the kind of place where history didn't just live in books. It breathed through every rusted gate, every cracked brick wall, every lingering look that lasted a second too long. Amara Johnson, 29, was used to that look. She had grown up with it. The slight narrowing of the eyes, the momentary pause in conversation, the subtle, tight-lipped smile that hovered on a stranger's face just long enough to let her know that she wasn't quite welcome. Not hostile, not open hatred. Just the echo of something uglier that used to be out in the open, now dressed in manners and southern charm. But Amara had learned how to navigate it. She was graceful, poised, articulate in that particular way that black children are taught to be if they want to survive, especially in towns like Charleston. She had a soft voice that teachers called professional, and a wardrobe that made her look like she worked in corporate, even when she was just going to pick up groceries. She smiled often, but never too wide, never too comfortable. Now, as a woman in her late 20s, she had built a peaceful life in Charleston. Peaceful, not easy. By day, she was a museum curator, working at the Charleston Historic Preservation Society, an elegant old institution that proudly displayed antique silverware, faded plantation ledgers, Civil War artifacts, and family heirlooms of the city's founding elite. She handled priceless relics from the Old South, a phrase that always left a bad taste in her mouth. She gave tours, cataloged collections, and even consulted on restoration projects for old family estates. To many, she was a rising star, a young black woman stepping into a world historically kept far out of reach. But the truth was, Amara often felt like a guest in someone else's house. The kind of guest you don't quite ask to leave, but never let feel at home. Still, she had carved out something that resembled contentment. She lived alone in a modest, but beautiful rented apartment in the city's historic district. Her neighbors were polite, her landlord left her alone, and the bakery across the street always saved her the last almond croissant. Each morning, Amara walked to work with her headphones in, letting soft jazz blend with the distant sound of horse hooves clacking along the old streets. She passed by mansions that had been standing for 200 years, some with small plaques proudly naming the families who built them, carefully omitting how they had been built. She noticed those omissions. More than most, Amara's mother, Lucille, had been a school teacher for over 30 years. She taught her daughter that truth mattered, even the uncomfortable kind. Lucille's great-grandmother had been born into slavery just 20 miles from where Amara now worked. Their family history had always been close, tangible, personal. Somewhere, deep in her bones, Amara carried that legacy. And while she never wore it like armor, she never forgot it either. She had learned early that in Charleston, remembering was an act of resistance. Still, she never expected that remembering would be the very thing to unravel everything. It started like a normal Tuesday. The museum was quiet in the mornings. Amara walked the polished hardwood floors of the East Wing, adjusting lighting fixtures and checking display tags. The upcoming exhibit was a special feature on the founding families of Charleston, sponsored by one of the wealthiest donors the museum had ever partnered with, Gregory Whitmore III, a tech billionaire who had recently discovered his Southern lineage and was eager to put his family's legacy on display. The exhibit was set to showcase jewelry, letters, and personal belongings from the Whitmore estate, including a few rare artifacts that hadn't been seen publicly in over 80 years. There were rumors that one of the pieces, a diamond ring, had once belonged to Gregory's great-great-grandmother and was passed down through generations as a symbol of their Southern nobility. The ring had its own display case, surrounded by dramatic lighting. A large placard read, "Whitmore Heirloom Ring, circa 1852, a family treasure." Amara had reviewed every item that came into the exhibit. She'd worn white gloves and moved delicately through each box, inspecting each artifact for condition, cataloging it into the museum's system, and arranging its place in the room. But when she first saw the ring, her breath caught in her throat. She hadn't expected it to be that ring. It was oval-shaped, with a delicate twisted gold band and a single brilliant stone in the center, small but unmistakable. The craftsmanship was exquisite, but it wasn't the beauty of the ring that left Amara shaken. It was the story behind it, because she'd seen it before, in a photo, decades ago. Black and white, frayed at the edges. Her mother had shown it to her on a rainy afternoon when Amara was only 11 years old. The photo showed a young black woman, tall, strong, and unsmiling, standing outside a small wooden house with nothing but pride in her eyes. On her hand, barely visible, was that exact ring Amara had asked. "Who is she?" Her mother had said, "Your great-grandmother Mary. She was born a slave but lived free." "What about the ring?" Amara had asked. Lucille had paused for a long time before answering. "That ring used to be hers, until it wasn't." That was all she had said. The conversation never came up again, but the image had stayed with Amara all her life, the woman, the house, the ring. And now here it was, in a glass case under the name of a billionaire whose family had owned plantations just outside Charleston. Something in her gut twisted. Amara had learned not to jump to conclusions, especially in a space like this. But she knew that ring didn't belong to the Whitmores, not originally. And if it had ended up in their hands, it wasn't through inheritance. It was through theft. Or worse. Her hands trembled as she finished the setup that day. She didn't say anything. Not yet. She needed to be sure. Over the next few days, Amara quietly began her own research. She dug into the museum's archives, searched property records, traced ownership documents. The Whitmores had owned 3 plantations in the mid-1800s. One of them was known as Bradley Hill, located just a few miles from the property where Amara's great-grandmother had lived and worked. The timelines matched. The geography matched. Even the initials engraved inside the ring's band, MB, lined up with the first name of Mary Bradley, a name Amara found in slave census records from 1850. The pieces were clicking into place, but the deeper she dug, the heavier the truth became. The museum was planning a gala. Gregory Whitmore would be attending. Press would be there. The exhibit would be unveiled in front of Charleston's elite, and this ring, her family's stolen legacy, would be presented as a Whitmore treasure, cheered by those who had no idea and maybe didn't care about how it got there. Amara was caught in a storm of questions. Was she imagining it? Would anyone believe her? If she spoke out, what would happen? The museum's board was mostly old Charleston families. The donor, Whitmore, was the largest benefactor they'd ever had. Calling out this theft wouldn't just be risky, it could end her career. But doing nothing felt worse, because this wasn't just about a ring, it was about truth, about the erasure of everything her family had endured. It was about legacy, hers, not his. And maybe, just maybe, It was time someone remembered loudly. By the end of that week, the tension inside her was unbearable. Amara couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Every time she looked at the ring, she heard her mother's voice. That ring used to be hers, until it wasn't. She walked the halls of the museum like a ghost, nodding to colleagues, smiling at visitors, all while carrying the weight of a century-old injustice tucked behind her ribs. Charleston was the kind of place that buried its past, in gardens and iron gates. But this time, it had floated to the surface and landed right at her feet. And Amara knew this story wasn't going to stay quiet. Not this time. The gala was just 10 days away. The museum buzzed with anticipation. Staff moved briskly through. The corridors, art handlers lifted gilded frames with white-gloved hands, and interns polished brass signage until it gleamed. Every hallway smelled faintly of lemon oil and stress. There were whispered talks of big donors, possible coverage from Southern Living, and murmurs about Gregory Whitmore himself, rumored to arrive in Charleston for the first time since acquiring his family's estate. But Amara felt none of the excitement, just pressure, like standing in a room where the air kept getting thinner. Each day she passed by the exhibit hall. The ring gleamed at her through the glass, cold, detached, as though mocking her. She tried to keep her mind on her tasks, finalizing the catalog notes, checking the security arrangements, working with the events team. But every time she caught sight of the display, her pulse quickened. The injustice burned hotter. Not only because the ring had once belonged to her family, but because of the story attached to it now. Gregory's family claimed the ring was an heirloom of honor, a symbol of Southern dignity, passed from mother to daughter in a lineage of wealth, strength, and vision. But that wasn't the truth. That wasn't even close. The truth was, the Whitmores had once owned people. They had enslaved men, women, and children for generations. And based on every record Amara could find, the ring didn't come from a loving grandmother. It came from a plantation inventory list. It had likely been stolen from her great-grandmother, maybe taken as punishment, maybe seized when Mary tried to flee, maybe sold, like so many other pieces of her life. Now that theft was being repackaged as a legacy and celebrated. Amara reached out to her mother on a quiet Sunday morning. They hadn't talked in a few days, and Amara had been carrying the weight alone. But now, it felt too heavy. She sat on the edge of her bed, phone trembling in her hand. "Hey, baby," Lucille answered. "You sound tired." Amara hesitated. "Mama, do you remember that photo you showed me? Of great-grandma? Mary?" Lucille paused on the other end. "With the ring?" "Yes." Lucille was quiet for a long time, then finally said, "You found it, didn't you?" Amara's heart dropped. "You knew it was missing?" "I always knew it was taken," Lucille said softly. "The story goes, Mary kept it hidden for years. It was given to her by a woman who helped her escape, maybe another servant or a mistress who felt guilt. No one really knows. But it was hers. One day, when she was caught trying to visit her sister on another plantation without permission, they punished her. Took everything. The ring disappeared after that. My mother always believed it ended up with the Whitmores." Amara sat frozen. "It's in the museum," she whispered. "Labeled as theirs." Lucille's voice cracked. "Of course it is." They sat in silence, separated by miles, but bound by pain. Lucille finally asked, "What are you going to do?" And Amara replied, "I don't know yet, but I can't stay quiet." The next morning, Amara typed an email to the museum director, Elaine Renner. Subject: Urgent concern. Whitmore exhibit. Dear Elaine, I need to bring to your attention a deeply troubling issue regarding the provenance of the Whitmore heirloom ring. I have reason to believe it did not originate within the Whitmore family. Line as claimed. My research suggests it once belonged to my great-grandmother, Mary Bradley, a formerly enslaved woman on the Bradley Hill plantation, which was owned by the Whitmores. I am requesting an immediate review of the ring's documentation and provenance. I would like to meet as soon as possible to discuss how to move forward ethically. Best, Amara Johnson. She hit send and sat back, heart pounding. She didn't hear back that day. The next day, she received a one-line reply. Let's speak in person. Come to my office at 4 p.m. today. The meeting was short. Icy.Elaine Renner was a woman of precision. Always composed, always calm. She had worn the same navy blazer every week since Amara started, and her office smelled like expensive candles and paperwork. Elaine gestured for Amara to sit, but didn't smile. I received your email, she said, folding her hands. Amara nodded. Elaine continued, You understand the timing of this is sensitive. Amara took a breath. I do. But this isn't just a matter of bad timing. It's a matter of truth. And possibly theft. Elaine pursed her lips. There is no formal documentation linking the ring to your family. None that would hold in a museum context. We rely on provenance records. The Whitmores provided theirs. I have records too, Amara replied. Slave records, property ledgers, oral family history, photographic evidence. Elaine's voice remained even. Oral history is difficult to verify, and frankly, it won't stand up to scrutiny. Amara stared at her. So you'd rather display a stolen artifact than risk offending a billionaire donor? A pause. Elaine looked down at her desk. I'm asking you not to pursue this further, at least until after the gala. Then we can revisit. Amara stood. If that ring stays in the exhibit under the Whitmore name, I'm going to tell the truth. I'm not going to let my family's history be buried for anyone's comfort. Elaine didn't look up. Then I'll have to speak to the board. The next day, Amara found herself removed from the gala committee, then reassigned to archive duties in the basement, then removed from all public-facing responsibilities. The message was clear: stay quiet or be erased. But it didn't work. That night she made a post on her personal blog, nothing accusatory, just a story, a photo of her great-grandmother, the ring, and a simple caption. History belongs to those who lived it, not just those who can afford to rewrite it. The post spread slowly, but steadily. Her followers shared it. A local Black heritage organization reached out, then a historian, then a genealogist. Soon, small waves of support began to form beneath the surface, but so did the backlash. A comment thread under her post exploded with anonymous users accusing her of slandering a respected family, of trying to cancel history, of playing victim. Someone even sent her a private message that read, "Careful who you accuse. Charleston doesn't forget." Her phone rang that night. It was Lucille. "I'm proud of you," her mother said, "but please, be safe." The day of the gala arrived. Tapo. Museum glowed in the twilight, its stone facade lit by string lights and flood lamps. Luxury cars lined the cobblestone street, and inside, servers passed flutes of champagne through crowds dressed in tuxedos and pearls. Amara wasn't invited, but she came anyway. She wore a long black dress, simple and elegant. Not flashy, but undeniable. She walked into the museum's side entrance, holding her ID and a small folder of documents in her clutch. Security hesitated at first, then let her in. She didn't speak to anyone. She didn't mingle. She walked directly to the exhibit hall, where a crowd had gathered around the display cases, sipping drinks and admiring the artifacts. There, in the center, was the ring, lit up like a crown jewel. Gregory Whitmore stood nearby, tall, with a warm politician's smile and perfectly tailored suit. He was surrounded by board members and museum patrons, all hanging on his every word. Amara stepped into the light, and everything changed. The room went quiet. It was subtle at first, A few heads turning, a whisper cutting through the soft string music. The way conversations slowed to a stop, as if the entire room had just realized something was off. There was Amara Johnson, standing just feet from the ring's display case. Not in uniform, not behind the scenes, not escorting guests or taking coats. But standing there, still, steady, composed, like she belonged. And in truth she did. Far more than most in that room. Gregory Whitmore noticed her only when the murmurs reached his circle. He turned, smile still half-formed on his face, the way someone might react to a minor disruption, a fallen glass, a technical delay. But then he saw her, saw the calm determination in her eyes, and his face shifted, just slightly, from charm to caution. Amara stepped forward. People began to part. The crowd opened slowly around her like a tide drawn back from shore. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "Mr. Whitmore," she said, her voice clear and controlled, "there's something I believe you should hear before this ring is celebrated any further tonight." Gasps flickered. Eyes darted to the ring, then back to Amara, then to Gregory. He tilted his head slightly, that polished veneer of benevolence still clinging to him. "I'm sorry. Have we met?" "I'm Amara Johnson, curator at this museum. I was part of the team that cataloged your family's artifacts, including that ring." Gregory's expression faltered for half a breath. "Ah, yes. You're with collections. You've done wonderful work. Thank you." He tried to shift the mood back to safe ground, but Amara didn't move. "I'd like to share a story," she said. "If that's all right with you?" Gregory hesitated, then nodded with forced grace. "Of course. Please." The room was completely silent now. No more drinks clinking. No more polite laughter. Even the string quartet had stopped playing, uncertain whether to continue. Amara reached into her clutch and pulled out a small, aged photograph. She held it up for the crowd to see. A black woman, standing tall in front of a small cabin, eyes fierce and full of history. "This is Mary Bradley," Amara said. "My great-grandmother. She was born into slavery on the Bradley Hill plantation. Records show she worked in the main house under the Whitmore family for nearly 20 years. In this photo, she's wearing a ring, small, gold, oval stone. You can't see it clearly, but we have a high-resolution scan. It matches this ring perfectly. Down to the engravings." She turned to the glass case. After Mary attempted to visit her sister on a neighboring plantation, without permission, the ring was taken from her, along with anything else of value. She was punished, brutally. After that day, the ring was never seen again. She turned back to Gregory, her voice unshaking. "And now it's here, in this exhibit. Claimed by your family as a symbol of wealth and legacy, but it was stolen from a woman who had no freedom, no rights, and no way to pass on what little she had to the generations after her." A collective breath was drawn through the room. Still, Gregory stood there, silent, unmoving, his jaw tight. Someone in the crowd whispered, "Is this true?" Gregory finally spoke, tone careful. "I'm not aware of any such record. The provenance paperwork we submitted was reviewed by the board and deemed sufficient. Perhaps this is a case of mistaken identity." Amara nodded slightly. "I thought, you might say that." She pulled out a second document. "This is the 1850 slave inventory from Bradley Hill. It lists Mary by name, alongside other women and men held by your family. Beside her name, a note. House girl, wears trinket from M, likely sentimental, confiscated." Gasps. Amara's voice didn't rise, but her words sliced clean. "This isn't about sentiment. It's about truth. My great-grandmother was a human being, not property. That ring represents everything she lost, her freedom, her dignity, her voice, And tonight, you plan to showcase it as if it were just another glittering piece of your heritage. She paused. But it's ours. All eyes were now on Gregory Whitmore. His smile had long vanished. What remained was a man caught between reputation and reckoning. He looked to the museum director, Elaine Renner, who had been standing frozen near the side of the room, her face drained of color. "Elaine," Gregory said, his voice quieter now, "was this vetted?" Elaine looked as though the ground beneath her might collapse. We followed standard protocol. The documents were verified." "What documents?" someone in the crowd asked. A woman from the Charleston Historical Society stepped forward. "I've seen the photo she's talking about, and the ledger. The match is very strong." Now more voices joined in. "Did you know this before the exhibit went up? Is the museum going to investigate? Will the ring be removed?" The tide was turning fast. Gregory looked back at Amara. "Look, I understand your frustration, truly. But if we start unraveling every piece of history like this, it's not unraveling," Amara interrupted. "It's correcting." Gregory's lips tightened. Then another voice rang out from the back of the room. An elderly black man, cane in hand, stepped forward. "That woman in the photo, Mary Bradley, she's part of my family, too. My grandmother used to tell us stories about her. Said she never got justice. Not for anything. Not even that ring." More murmurs. Amara turned, stunned. "I've never met you," she said softly. "You just did," he replied. "And you're not alone." A ripple of emotion passed through the room. Elaine stepped forward, finally finding her voice. "This was not in our official records," she said to the crowd. "But based on what's been presented, we will begin an immediate review of the artifact's provenance." She turned to Gregory carefully. "I believe it's best we remove the ring from display until further investigation is complete." Gregory's face was stone. Amara looked at the ring one last time. "It's more than just a ring," she said to no one and everyone. "It's a memory, a warning, a reminder that even now history can be rewritten, not with facts, but with money, with silence, with power." Then she stepped back, and the room burst into conversation, debate, emotion. The gala continued, but nothing felt the same. People didn't go back to their drinks right away. They lingered by the ring case, now conspicuously empty after a staff member removed it. They debated, questioned, reflected, but most of all, they remembered. Dear audience, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to give it a like. It really helps. The next morning, Charleston woke up different. The gala had ended, but the story didn't stay in that marble-floored museum. It spilled out, first through whispers, then through headlines, and finally, into the very heart of the city's legacy. Curator challenges museum over stolen heirloom, linked to enslaved ancestor. Billionaire's family artifact sparks racial reckoning. At gala, Charleston's dark past resurfaces through one woman's courage. Within 24 hours, the video of Amara speaking at the gala was everywhere. Someone in the crowd had filmed it. Steady hands, clear audio. The moment she held up the photo. The line, "It's not unraveling, it's correcting." That clip alone was reshared thousands of times. People watched it not just in Charleston, but in Atlanta, in Philadelphia, in London, and Lagos. Suddenly, Amara wasn't just a museum worker. She had become a voice, a witness to a story that so many had lived, but so few had dared to tell in public spaces, meant to erase it. The museum issued a statement 2 days later. "We are pausing the Whitmore exhibit pending further review of all items' provenance. We thank Ms. Johnson for her commitment to historical accuracy and her bravery in bringing these concerns forward." It was formal, polished. But beneath the surface, the tension ran deep. Amara was called into another meeting. This time, not just with Elaine, but with 2 board members, a lawyer and a PR officer. They offered her a choice: step away from the public spotlight while they handled the review internally, or consider taking a leave of absence for her own well-being. But she wasn't afraid anymore. Amara politely declined both. And then she did something no one expected. She launched her own project. It began modestly, a website called Unclaimed Artifacts of the Ancestors. The goal was simple: to gather stories, photos, documents, and oral histories from Black families across the South who suspected their families' belongings, rings, quilts, Bibles, portraits, had been taken, lost, or misrepresented in museums, private estates, or auctions. Within a week, hundreds of people reached out. A woman in Alabama had a tintype photo with a piece of jewelry in it, almost identical to one she'd seen in a plantation tour display. A man in Georgia said his grandfather remembered being beaten for hiding a gold pocket watch that once belonged to their father. And years later, that same watch showed up in a city museum labeled "Donated by a Prominent Family." The stories kept coming, some painful, some infuriating, all too familiar. Amara partnered with historians, archivists, and genealogists. They began cross-referencing records, comparing plantation ledgers with auction records, estate files, and museum catalogs. It wasn't just about the ring anymore. It was about restoring memory. Meanwhile, Gregory Whitmore's PR team scrambled to contain the damage. His foundation issued a statement acknowledging the possibility of historical mishandling, but made no admission of wrongdoing. He pledged to donate $100,000 to historical preservation efforts focused on marginalized communities. But many saw it for what it was: reputation maintenance, not real accountability. A week later, Gregory reached out to Amara privately. He asked to meet, just the 2 of them. She agreed, but only if it was recorded. They sat at a small conference table in the museum's research wing, a neutral location. Amara had brought copies of her documents. Gregory had brought his assistant and a carefully prepared statement. But before he could read it, Amara spoke. "You don't need to say anything rehearsed. I'm not here for a soundbite." Gregory paused, then finally, quietly, "Do you really believe the ring was stolen?" She looked him dead in the eye. "I don't believe." "I know." He shifted uncomfortably. "It was before my time. So was slavery," she replied. "But we still live with it." He sighed, and for the first time the mask slipped just slightly. "My family, they always taught me we came from pride, honor. I didn't know there was so much blood behind it." Amara nodded. "Most don't. That's the problem." A long silence passed. Then he asked, "What would you have me do?" She paused. "Not just return the ring. That's the minimum. Acknowledge what it was, what it represented. Tell the truth, not in private, publicly." He didn't answer right away. But the next morning, a press release went out. "After meeting with Ms. Amara Johnson, I've come to understand that the Whitmore heirloom ring was never rightfully ours to display or claim. The ring belonged to Mary Bradley, an enslaved woman held by my ancestors. As such, I am formally returning the ring to her family's descendants, and I commit to funding an independent review of all Whitmore estate artifacts in public collections. This is not about guilt, it is about truth." 2 weeks later, the museum held a small, private ceremony. There was no gala, no champagne, no string quartet, just Amara, her mother Lucille, several elders from the local Black community, and a few museum staff who had chosen to stand with her. The ring, once displayed as a symbol of aristocracy, was now being handed back to the family it had been taken from. It was placed in Lucille's palm with quiet reverence. Lucille held it like it was made of glass, like it held centuries of breath inside. Tears welled in her eyes. This "This belongs to all of us," she whispered. Amara didn't cry. Not yet. She just held her mother's hand and let the weight of it all settle in her chest, not as grief, but as truth restored. But the story didn't end there. Months passed. The unclaimed project grew into a nonprofit. Schools began using Amara's materials in classrooms. Museums reached out to partner. Even the Smithsonian expressed interest in highlighting the effort as part of a larger initiative around restorative justice. Other curators began to speak up, quietly at first, then louder. In New Orleans, a curator resigned in protest over a misrepresented exhibit. In Savannah, a city archive acknowledged that certain donations from the 1800s had come from plantation raids. And in Charleston, the museum Amara once worked for began a new initiative, one dedicated to corrective provenance, with Amara as its lead advisor. She was offered her old job back. She turned it down. Instead, she chose to keep building something that had never existed before, a platform for reclaiming what was stolen not just in objects, but in stories, in dignity, in voice. She didn't want a title. She wanted change. One afternoon, while reviewing new submissions to the unclaimed database, she received a message from a woman in Mississippi. It read, "My grandmother always said her mother had a Bible taken from her during an escape. She never saw it again. I saw a photo of one just like it in an estate sale catalog. I don't know if it's ours, but it feels like it." Amara stared at the screen, her chest rising slowly. She knew that feeling, the ache of remembering what was never allowed to be remembered. She replied gently, "Let's find out, together." Years from now, people may not remember the gala or the billionaire, but they'll remember that moment when one woman stood in front of a room full of power and said, "This isn't just history. This is mine." And for the first time in a long time, people listened, because the truth, once spoken, echoes louder than silence. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories and new videos.